In the year 1984, Big Brother was watching when you were awake, but Freddy's watching when you're asleep.
Right, and digital synths are becoming the standard.
I do love some digital synths.
So. Yes. Today is a Nightmare on Elm Street, the originals, fantastic digital. Well, you know what? It could be a mixture. I'm not sure, but I'm hearing the DX7, I think, so for synth geeks. But that's neither here nor there. Classic 80s slasher. Arguably the premier 80s slasher, though there will be Michael Myers and Jason fans. Well, Halloween's 78, but whatever. It's under contention, but for me, this is kind of like slasher ground zero for me. So this is Matt.
This is Luke.
Welcome to the sanctuary of horror. I mean, VHS stores would list as sci-fi/horror, so
yeah.
They go to the Dream Institute, right?
It's our podcast. We can do whatever the fuck we want.
That's right. Hey, they do the Dream Institute with Roger Rabbit. So
yeah, there's a science bit. It's science fiction.
Yeah. Coming back, I had to apologize before we start recording. We just keep calling you in for Halloween, but it's Henrique Couto. Thanks for joining us again for another 80s basher.
Well, you know, once you've directed more than like 5 or 6 horror films, you can't be mad when people hit you up around Halloween. You know, I did that to myself.
But you know, we're giving you some nice prime rib of 80s cheese. We're on different situations here. So I started watching this one. Well, the first Elm Street, which is actually the second one, taped off of UHF television with lots of edits. I watched that for a little while. And then, I started going across the street to Andrew Shear's and at 9 years old and watching slasher films when because my parents wouldn't let me. So we just watched, we said in one of our podcasts recently, there were no parents there most of the time. So we watched what we wanted. And this one was quite often on the docket. He had the poster in his room where he'd tell anyone who came in, like, the eyes follow you wherever you go in my room. Freddy's eyes.
I used to terrorize kids with Nightmare on Elm Street because I had access to it and most people didn't. I had the tapes because I had a sister who was 9 years older than me. So, because I was born in 86. So she was like a teen during the height of Freddy's popularity, really. And then I got to kind of get into it when it was a little bit older, but I had all these tapes 1 through 5. And I used to watch them constantly. And anytime any kid stayed the night at my house, I had to pop out Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 to scare the crap out of them. And also because I didn't like to watch it by myself because it was so scary. So, but I remember one time during that opening death scene, that opening scene where Tina gets killed, a kid that was staying the night at my house for the first time ran out of my bedroom door and ran through the hallway into the living room and was like trying to get out of the house. Like that was how startled he was by the death scene. And it's like, it's on a TV set, man.
Don't run out of the house. That's what Tina's doing.
Yeah, no, really. So, but I just remember him screaming, and I had to calm him down. But my favorite thing about sharing Freddy as a kid was that they would get really, really scared. And sometimes parents would call my mother and be like, what? And my mom would be like, whatever, then don't have him over. I don't know what to tell you. Like, my mom like just gave no fucks. She was just like, whatever. I mean, yeah, like, look, it's good, clean fun. I don't know if you don't like it, that's fine. That's your deal. So
I actually haven't watched these for a while because when I lived in America last, I got, what was it, like $10 for everything up to New Nightmare, like on a couple discs. And I put them in a DVD. I watched them all, and then I put them in a DVD file, and I don't remember which file that was, and it might be in America. No, I watched the backup copy, but
yes, of course, the backup copy.
I owned it on VHS and on DVD. It's a true backup copy in this case. Okay.
Yeah, I had the 5 VHSs, and then I had part 6 on VHS, but it was taped off of satellite television by my Aunt Betty, who used to tape movies off of satellite like it was her job, like she was being paid a wage. She had a wall of tapes, and they all had labels with pencil written on them that said, like, Puppet Master 4 and 5. Nightmare on Elm Street 6, Freddy's Dead. Like, they were all labeled, and you'd come over and just and she'd be like, take a look at the wall, see if you want something, because she wanted you to make room. so she could tape more stuff. She had one of those giant satellite dishes, that just pulled everything out of the sky back in the 90s. So we would always be scoping out, like, I wonder what Aunt Betty's got, what horrors await. And you'd be like 8. I don't know if I don't think she watched them, because she's like, you're like 8 years old. It's like, here you go, Ricky, you take yourself. She's very, very from Kentucky. Yeah, like, here you go. And I take this movie home with like topless women and murder.
Yeah, for me, I did do that job, but it was we didn't have cable, so we'd go up to my aunt's house in Delaware for a week. She had HBO and Showtime, so I'd get out like the cable guide, not the TV guide, the cable guide, and mark out.
Guide, baby.
We'd plan the trips, to the beach and like around what movies I wanted to tape.
That's so cool. I love that.
But it was all within a week, right? The rest of the year I didn't do that stuff. So Luke, you're pretty new to the sphere.
So when this film came out, I was -6 years old. So I grew up obviously very aware of Nightmare on Elm Street and Jason and all of this stuff, but not really watching any of it. My experience of going to my uncle's and watching films my mum didn't want me to watch was all action stuff. Like if I wanted super gore, I wanted Schwarzenegger destroying 80 people, not Freddy killing 6 people. So
Schwarzenegger's far more efficient than Freddy Krueger. I'm sorry.
If Schwarzenegger wanted to kill these 4 teens, they'd be dead in the opening credits.
And they wouldn't show up in the last scene to get killed again.
No way, Jose.
Schwarzenegger. They're gone. Hasta la vista, baby.
So I think watching this film last night was the first time I've watched a Nightmare on Elm Street film from start to finish.
Wow.
Yeah. I've dressed up as Freddy for Halloween before, but I don't think I'd ever seen one of the films all the way through.
I mean, well, he's iconic. There's no doubt about it. I have a nightmare glove, which is like a Freddy Krueger glove that's actually made out of steel and metal, handmade, just like the glove in the movie.
You go slashing.
Oh man, I actually cut my birthday cake on my 30th birthday with it. I sat there just cutting the cake. Who wants one? I was like, it might taste funny because I think these are covered in paint, but I don't care.
And icing's not good for you anyway. So
yeah.
For me, watching it last night, it had been a while, and I think it'd been the first time I watched it since getting into Garth Marenghi's Dark Place.
Okay, yeah.
So it was like watching. I still love it, but I'm like, this actually, like the dialogue in this movie is absolutely ridiculous, like in a fantastic way. But I'm like, who wrote this? No one ever talked like this ever.
Well, Wes Craven is an interesting dude. I don't know if you know a whole lot about him, but he grew up. I forget exactly what, but he grew up in one of those very extreme American religious sects, like maybe it was Quakers or something like that. So he did not see the first movie he saw. He was in college because they weren't allowed to watch movies. They were allowed to watch like some film strips, but not a single feature movie. So the first movie he saw when he was like 20 was The Wizard of Oz, and it blew his mind. So, and that was while he was in college studying the arts. He sees his first movie, and his first thought is, I got to get in on this. Like, this is for me. I want to make movies. So his movies all there's something about them that's so different. And I think that it has a lot to do with him kind of coming at it from like the opposite of a child's point of view. He understood how to like, drive a car and have an adult conversation. And then he started watching movies, as to where like watching movies formed my understanding of how to interact with other human beings and how to tell a story. And I mean, I don't know when I didn't have movies around as a kid, especially a lot of the time it was just me and my mother. So, the videotapes are the best babysitter, the cheapest possible babysitter. She's got work to do, put on a tape. So it just kind of blows my mind. I read a book about him a couple years ago about Wes Craven. And when I heard that, I was like, wow, that's a whole other way of seeing things. But it also, then you hear that, and then you think that he's nearly 30, I believe, when he does Nightmare on Elm Street, and he's writing, what teenagers would say. So it does get a little silly.
No, like I said, I love it. But yeah, last time I was really just like, just sitting there like, wow, these words coming out of their mouth are constructed so weird.
There are one or two, definitely exchanges which I noticed, but there's a real art to middle-aged men writing young people, and not many people can do it. So
no, you're right. And I know that he had teen children. He had at least one teenage daughter when he was making that, or maybe she wasn't quite a teenager, maybe she was 12 or so, because he claims that she's the reason he cast Johnny Depp, because he was looking at everybody and he was just like not sure who to go with, and she was like, you got to cast Johnny Depp, and he was like, really? He's kind of pale and sickly looking, and she was like, oh no, he's beautiful. And she was the beginning of the Depp fandom, was Wes Craven's daughter. She was right on that curve. So but no, and it's interesting too, because Nightmare on Elm Street, very dreamy movie. You mentioned how it was kind of the slasher movie for you. I think that it was the first turn in the real evolution of the slasher movie, where you kind of, lack of a better term, you kind of opened it up, like you let it dream a little bit more. It wasn't just a guy in a mask with a knife and then a guy in a different mask with a different knife but in a different place. It became this whole other deal where it's like, okay, so we're going to kill a bunch of teenagers, don't you worry, they are going to die. But it might not be what you're expecting necessarily. It might be very different. And I think that was a logical progression, because by the end of 1988, 1989, slasher movies were already so played out, and they only really existed for 12 or 13 years as a subgenre, and they were already tired. Even Freddy Krueger movies were getting tired by then. So it really kind of sets it up though. And Freddy is an interesting series, because it's in a way the most consistent slasher series, even though it's very inconsistent. like they're all slickly made. They all have a lot of imagination. They all have a decent amount of money behind them. You watch the Friday the 13th movies, and they're kind of disparate. They're kind of a little bit of this, a little bit of that. One's made, two of them are made in New Jersey, then they do one in LA, and then they do one in Mississippi, and they did one in Georgia, and then eventually space. Yeah. So that's the thing with the Freddy movies. You always had Robert Englund. You had a few returning characters here and there, so it kind of felt a little bit more like a congruent story. So as a kid, I got really into it. I got really into the Nightmare on Elm Street universe. I was always thinking about it because I was such a nerd. I wrote a Nightmare on Elm Street sequel when I was in school, because we had a free writing assignment. You could write whatever you wanted, as long as you wrote it, and you get a grade. And I wrote my ultimate Nightmare on Elm Street sequel, and it had like every single character that didn't die returned in it. Like it was so like exactly what a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy would fill it with.
See,
I didn't. Yeah, sorry.
If you're 16, maybe you'd go with like, it's gonna have all the victims return.
Whoa. Yeah, I wasn't edgy enough. I wanted like Freddy to have puns. Like that's how bad I was like trying to find the puns Freddy could say when he killed these kids. So it's like I was like obsessed with the lowest common denominator of what people love about Freddy. I was like, where are the puns, man? Gotta come up with some puns.
Can I put you on the spot for a death pun?
How have I killed the person?
Surrealistically with Mario.
Okay, let's go to hell.
There we go. So I know I can put him on the spot for that shit, and I'll get something.
Golf clap 100%.
Before we get a little deeper, I guess we will go plot wise then, and Luke will spew out the plot of this particular caper.
Indeed I will. When it loads.
The internet.
Tina is pursued through a grungy locale by a creep with a burned face, stripy shirt, dirty hat, and some clawed gloves. Luckily, it was all a dream. The next day, she learns that her friend Nancy, along with Nancy's boyfriend Glenn, also had nightmares that night. Afraid to sleep alone, she invites them for a sleepover, which is crashed by Tina's on-off squeeze Rod. Tina has another dream about the creep.
Another creep. Yeah.
About the creep who manages to eviscerate her in spooky fashion in the real world. Rod takes the fall for the murder, but he and then Glenn are also killed by the dream creep. Meanwhile, Nancy investigates, learning that she can pull him into the real world and that his identity is Fred Krueger, a child murderer who was killed by neighborhood parents years ago. Nancy manages to defeat him through her psychic fortitude. Or does she?
Psychic fortitude is a little odd way to describe it, but I also like how it jumps very quickly. It's like those two die. Then she discovers she can bring him into the real world. And you're like, oh, okay, well, we skipped about 35 minutes, but it was really just 35 minutes of murder. So
yeah.
You did skip a blood geyser, or I'm going to call you on that.
I mean, I said he died. He died
by
a blood geyser. Yeah, but that's what the next hour of podcast is for, Matt.
Yes.
If I can't mention every scene in the synopsis.
Let's get into the actors a bit. Watching it last night, I was like, what, Heather Langenkamp is like third or fourth on the credits, which I thought was weird. I mean,
really, she is?
Yeah, especially I think John Saxon's above her.
Oh, well, that makes sense though. I mean, he was a name. He was a name at the time. And it was a big deal for him to do that movie, just because they were kind of a laughing stock in Hollywood at the time, because literally every studio turned down Nightmare on Elm Street except for New Line. So, but when John Saxon's talking to his LA buddy, he's like, I'm doing this Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, oh, you mean that movie that like everybody at this table said was not good enough to make? Have fun. Have a great time. And he was like, look, I got gambling debts, you know?
But yeah, he's above on the credits. Robert Englund, sorry, I haven't said his name in a while. He gets the "and" credit, which absolutely makes sense in this one in particular.
Yes.
So, because I mean, God, he's only on screen for what, 5 minutes at most.
He's also
it's not much, yeah.
He's listed as Fred Krueger.
Oh, he's Fred in this movie.
Yeah, that was one of the things. Like, oh, it's still just Fred in this one.
So the second one is Freddy's Revenge, right? That's where it gets the name.
Well, in the first one, I think he refers to himself as Fred. Yeah, he refers to himself as Freddy, but everybody calls him Fred Krueger other than him. It's like, because he's a child murderer, so it's like nothing creepier than the fact that he's like making himself more fun. Come and hang out with Freddy. Like
I'm your new boyfriend.
Yeah. Remember that part where he has the face in the wall? It's like, help, please save me from Freddy. There's so much to love about that movie.
Yeah, the puns don't really start kicking into the sequels, but
yeah.
Well,
he wisecracks a tiny bit, but not a lot. Not a lot at all. He wisecracks like just
through and through a horror, right?
Yeah, I mean, he wisecracks just enough to make it kind of creepy how much he likes killing.
Yeah.
And that's really what he does when he makes his little comments. You're just like, he really is into this. Like he's like, I have an intellect and this is all fine with me. You're like, oh shit, okay.
Well, that's where I do find him preferable to Jason or Michael Myers, which they're forces of nature more like, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess there's kind of a person there, but there's no logic where Freddy, I guess technically you could talk him out of this stuff, but you're not going to.
No. But he'll be happy to sit and have a chat with you, for a little while. And if he gets bored, he'll just start adding bitch to it every now and then, just to keep it going.
And then it's all gonna end with, I gotta practice my slashing.
I always loved that he laughed so much in the later movies. He was just always laughing. Freddy found everything he did so amusing.
Yeah, he's kind of working out more. I did the hobo stumble really came through watching it this time. Like it really does look like like some homeless guy on the street just starts like going after you, right?
Well, do you know that story about where he kind of got the idea for Freddy's look? Wes Craven?
I have not watched that. There's like a 4
Never
hour
Sleep
documentary.
Again.
Yeah, I haven't actually watched that one day, but
it's a good watch. Well, he came up with Wes Craven came up with the idea because one night when he was home alone with his little brother, and his parents were out, they were getting ready for bed. And they look out this window and he sees like a bum, just kind of walking down the street, down the sidewalk. And he's like staring at this bum, like creeped out. He's got like a hat on and a jacket, and he's staring at him, and the bum just kind of eventually looks back and sees him, and he's like closes, he goes like, oh my God. He like goes to like hide. He's like, oh God, that guy saw me. What am I gonna do? And he said that when he finally got brave enough to peek back, the bum had walked up to the house closer and was just like looking right back at him. Like he was probably just drunk and wanted to scare a kid because it was funny. Like, but he said that was the inspiration, was how terrified he was of this just like this bum who was so covered in shadows that he just imagined a million ways he would be gruesome looking if he actually had gotten a look at him. And then he claims that he named him Fred Krueger after a bully he had in school, that he named Freddy Krueger after a bully. I don't know if that one I've only heard in one source, but so Craven's like big on like referencing things from, you know, his weird Quaker, you know, childhood and stuff. But apparently it all started with a creepy hobo. And don't some of the best stories in life start that way?
No, I was thinking, actually my story comes from when I was like 23, and I had a roommate who just was like, he was nice to everybody. So he had some shady friends, and 3 a.m, there's a knocking on my window, and there's a drunk hobo outside. I said, yeah, my memory's got the hat, right? And he wanted to ride to the worst part of town. So what did I do?
Gave him the ride.
Yeah.
Oh man.
To the worst part of town. Yeah,
what did you guys talk about? You know?
I don't even remember. It wasn't that long a drive, to be perfectly honest. We didn't live in the best part of town.
Okay, fair enough. He was like, hey, can you drive me to another place to be a hobo there? And you were like,
I guess so.
Yeah, oh, okay.
Well, that got him away.
Yeah, I mean, you know,
he's not coming back. I drove 5 miles.
See?
But yeah, Heather Langenkamp to me actually would technically seems, I mean, she feels top billing here, even against Johnny Depp. She didn't quite get it. That's fine. Johnny Depp, of course, gets the introducing, which is fun and make actually quite iconic now. But yeah, how did, well, first I'll go for Luke. How many Scream Queens are you familiar with? Because you're more of the action guy, right?
Yeah, I know a couple of them, but
how did she do for one of your Scream Queens?
She was quite like, she wasn't just like a victim for most of it.
Oh God, not at all. She
took the lead in the film for the most part. I almost don't like Tina was more of a scream queen. Scream queen. Again.
Again. What you got in your mind, boy?
Tina Scream.
No, and if you think about the expectations established, then Tina totally comes across as the lead until she gets killed. She's blonde, she's pretty, she has the boyfriend, like she's just kind of all of the things you would expect, because a lot of those slasher movies had established the all-American girl, being the heroine. And then what do? They just slice and dice her.
Yeah, I was definitely thinking, in the way she looks, her haircut, everything. I guess they're going for the Psycho reference and Janet Leigh. So
definitely. Well, and that's the thing, Wes Craven stuff, because of his background, everything's very scholarly with him. Everything's always a basic reference or an inspiration or what have you. Because he always wore his inspirations on his sleeve, because unlike us, he didn't have anything tattooed on his soul. Like I have movie scenes tattooed on my soul because I saw them as a child over and over and over. Like I've watched movies where that I've made where I've been like, oh, that's like Terminator 2, like the way those cuts are. When I did it, I had no idea. It just looked right because it's in my heart. It's not in my brain.
Luke, so bless your arm. He just set you up in 8 different ways.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
The actual Terminator 2 tattoo.
No fate but what we make for ourselves. The future's not set. Terminator 2 is probably my all-time favorite movie ever. So
same. Yeah. But yeah, I wonder if I think it's all a deliberate misdirection, which might be why Langenkamp's not top billing.
Yeah,
because having not seen the film before, I fully believe Tina would be the main character. And the first 10 minutes of the film is pretty much she's the point of view character. And then it's only after she's bumped off that the point of view switches over to Nancy. So I feel like that's all pretty deliberate.
Well, and it depends on how good her lawyer is, because billing is negotiated by lawyers. And that's important to also keep in mind.
But I bet none of these kids had good lawyers, so Craven could just do what he wanted with their billing.
You might be surprised. Like introducing Johnny Depp, that was negotiated by a lawyer.
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, like and Robert Englund, that's negotiated by a lawyer. It's funny because it always goes two ways with the lawyers in the credits. It either goes like, I want first billing, or it's the celebrity doesn't want to be billed first because they only worked a day on the film. So like, I can only be billed third. I've worked on movies where the celebrity's contract says like, you have to bill me third. You can't bill me first or second because it's like, you only paid me for one day's work. I don't want you getting that much out of it. So oh, show business, no business I know. But no, it does surprise me. It's been forever since I looked at like the poster or anything to see what their crediting is like.
This is another one where I never got that shock, I guess, the first time, because I watched, like I said, I saw the second one first. Then I probably saw 3 and 4, and then I probably finally saw the first one. I think, I think it was 2, 3, 4, 1. And then 5 had not come out yet by that point. So, because that's what you could easily find the video store, right? They had like the 20 new releases of 3 and 4 because they came out real close to each other. So,
yeah, I mean, they were cranking them out. Once they got 2 out successfully, then 3, 4, 5, they all came out so incredibly quickly.
I'm trying to remember what the first one I actually saw in the theater was, because you can't get in the theater if you're a kid, especially not for Elm Street movies.
Yeah, probably not.
Our biggest fail, of course, was the notorious Army of Darkness, where he bought tickets for Homeward Bound and then tried to switch and then got kicked back into Homeward Bound. Took me a year before I actually saw Army of Darkness.
I remember going to R-rated movies as a kid, never being that big of a deal because, I mean, my mother didn't care. So my mother would be like, I'll go in, buy the ticket, then just hand it to you and you can go in. I don't care. I'd be like 12. And then that always worked until Freddy versus Jason came out. They wouldn't let me go in. They were like, no, you where's your parent? And I'm like, she's the one who bought the ticket. How do you think she got the ticket? This is like, it's not like we bought it on an app. They'd be like, what's an app? Like she bought a ticket and they're like, she's got to go in with you. So I had to call my mom on her cell phone and be like, they're saying you have to come in with me. So my mother had to sat in like the 6th row during Freddy versus Jason, like bored.
Oh, she didn't like it then. Okay, so I'll ask, did she like it?
I just don't think she cared at that point. My mother was actually a huge fan of the first movie. She thought they were really scary. And I remember when Wes Craven's A New Nightmare came out, she ran and rented it and we ordered pizza and watched it together in the living room. So I remember that. So she liked them, but at that point I think she was like, we're a lot alike, so we're always mad if we're told we have to do something. We only want to do something if we want to do it.
In the UK, they're a lot more strict about
it's law.
Yeah, so even if your mum's with you, if you're underage, I only ever saw one film in the cinema when I wasn't technically old enough, and it was Troy. And I was only 1 year too young. It barely counts.
I think.
Oh man, you better be careful. The statute of limitations probably isn't up on that in the United Kingdom. You can't go back now, baby.
Definitely, I don't plan to. But also, yes, that was like 17 years ago.
Nope. You know how strict they are out there.
But what I do remember is renting films. I went in with my brother to rent 2 films, and one of them was PG and one of them was 12. They let me have the 12 because I was older than 12. But wouldn't let me have the PG because my parents weren't there. I'm like, but 12 is more than PG. Like, what if my mum comes? Does she need to bring her mum?
Yeah, it says parental guidance suggested.
It says parental guidance, so you need your parents.
My parents guided me to the store through nurture.
There's this new movie that came out called I believe it was just called The Censor. And it's a fictional account of like a censor in England in the 80s.
Okay.
Super interesting. You probably get a huge kick. I mean, I got a huge kick out of it. You probably get a huge kick out. You should check it out.
Yeah, that does sound interesting.
Well, there's a whole part where she goes to the video store because she's been like censoring these movies, but she's starting to have nightmares about them. Or no, the movies are reflecting her nightmares. Like she has nightmares, and then she watches one of the movies and it is her nightmare, and she'd never seen it before. So she starts getting obsessed with this director's work. So she goes to the video store and is just like, hello, do you where do you have like the uncut movies? Is like, ma'am, that's illegal. I'm not going to do a British accent to you, I promise. But but always like, that's illegal. And she's like, I was told by a friend that you might have it. It's so funny. I was just like, and he like goes to the back and have all the dub tapes and stuff. And I was like, man, that had to be exactly what it was like too. Because especially during the Video Nasty era, there were so many movies banned, but the people were seeing them. There's no way they were.
Oh yeah.
Well, that's where the more fun VHS stores came into play, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. But the scary thing is, in the United States, now it's the MPA. It's the Motion Picture Association, but it used to be just the of America. Those are all guidelines. They're suggestions. If theaters break those suggestions or guidelines, they don't get fined or anything. They just might lose some accreditation. But in the United Kingdom, those ratings are placed by a legislative body. There are laws, and if you break them, there could be real like criminal penalties, which is just crazy. Like blows my mind. Insane to imagine.
Oh yeah, but see, to me, it's crazy that it's the other way around. But that's because I grew up in Europe, where we have laws protecting us.
I mean,
not just from films, but guns.
Protecting you from bad taste. We have laws. Well, just so you know, we have laws that protect us from guns too. It's illegal to murder someone, but laws don't protect anybody. That's the thing. but thank God they had laws to protect from bad taste, because in England they never suffer from bad taste, not at all.
All the food's good. So
I saw that meme the other day that was Bill Burr, and it just said, after eating for 3 days in England, I now know why Gordon Ramsay's so fucking angry all the time.
So what should I get if I bop on down to the UK?
Get savory pastries. They're actually all really good.
Okay.
Your sausage rolls and your pasties and stuff.
See, I feel like it goes straight for the Indian.
But yeah, go to another ethnicity's food and it'll be good.
Okay.
That's how it works in the US too. It's like, what's good here? Well, there's a few good things, but Thai food. Check out the Thai food.
The best British food is Indian food. Although, to be fair, what we call Indian food is not what they eat in India. It is a British cuisine.
Yeah.
The joys of imperialism.
Well, in Japan too, but yeah, we got the British. Well, no, there's a Japanese version of your curry and there's a British version of your curry, which they call Indian. But unless you hit somewhere else, but
we used to go to the Indian restaurant a lot because it was the place that would serve us alcohol.
Isn't this for the curries?
When we're like 16 and we're just getting bottles of wine with our curry.
What's the smallest amount of curry you can sell me, and what's the largest amount of alcohol you can sell me? Those are the options I would like.
I've definitely had an onion bhaji and 2 bottles of white wine.
Have you had any precognitive dreams, like your sensors?
Not quite, but I used to have, if I like the next day at school I had PE or I had homework or something, the way I would remember is I would have a dream about forgetting it.
Oh, anxiety dream.
But that's the only way I ever remembered I needed to take something to school, would be that the night before I dreamed I forgot.
About 1.5 years ago, I had a dream where I met with Luke and mine's old boss, and I had the meeting in the dream, right? So the next day I kind of forgot about, because in my memory the meeting had already happened, but it hadn't.
I've definitely I've fallen asleep texting someone, dreamed that I'd replied and never bothered to message them. That's happened.
Oh, I've many times I've woken up and checked the phone and been like, I guess I didn't send anything. Okay. or I guess they didn't call me. Okay. Yeah. All right.
Oh, that response that was really witty only made sense in dream logic and is actually gibberish.
Nothing beats that it was hilarious in my dream, and then the more you think about it, the more it falls apart immediately.
Yeah, especially my Saturday mornings. Sometimes I'll check the phone, maybe check the weather, and then I'll realize, wait a minute, you didn't get up at all. That was the dream phone you just checked. So the time on that phone is probably not accurate.
and the weather's not going to be what you're hoping.
You also just missed an opportunity for astral projection. So
Hell. Hell's bells and taco shells.
Exactly. I'm like, no, what you do in that case is you leave the room, right? Just like Tina. Hopefully Freddy's not out there. Because he's usually not, but
every now and then he is.
Yep, that's right. I did have a relatively lucid dream where I had some people coming after me, and since it was lucid, I was like, went all Doctor Strange on them. That was kind of cool.
Oh, sorry, please.
And I went out of my way not to kill them. I just banished them. I don't remember where. I was like,
you banished them?
Yeah, I know it's a dream, but I'm not gonna murder in my dream. Don't want to be like Freddy, so I banished them.
I've murdered a lot of people in dreams.
Well,
that's what happens when you grow up watching Schwarzenegger and playing video games.
Well, yeah.
I haven't had many like nightmares where it's been something's hunting me. I've definitely had dreams where it's like, oh, these people killed my rabbit, so they're all gonna die.
That's the John Wick dream.
Yeah, basically.
Okay, yeah. All right. I used to, when I was a kid, the closest thing to lucid dreams I had was if I had really scary nightmares, I could wake myself up. Like I could literally just be like, nah, and then I just wake up in bed and be like,
Oh, so
okay.
you were Johnny Depp.
Yeah.
And I wonder if Nightmare on Elm Street played a part in that, because I was watching those movies from so young. I do wonder if like that was why I tried to be my own dream master. But I remember like waking myself up because dreams were too scary sometimes. I wasn't prone to nightmares, so every now and then would happen. And I never had any of those awesome, I'm awake, no, I'm not, I'm actually asleep. I never had any of those awesome moments. Those were only for the kids in the movies, sadly.
So Roger Rabbit tells us we don't know where dreams come from, right? Which gives us a whole lot of space to work with in a film such as this. So where is Freddy? I mean, I guess they get into that more later movies, but like in like abstract, stupid ways, right? So
I mean, it's very abstract at first, and then it becomes extremely stupid by the end. Because by part 6, they introduce the idea that as he's about to die, these 3 dream demons come to him and make a deal with him, make a bargain with him. That he can live forever in the dream realm as long as he brings them souls. So, but before that, there's this kind of like, I love how everybody gets to put their imprint on it. Like, because in part 3, it gets really Catholic, which was kind of fun though. I mean, like it kind of reminded me of like a Hammer horror movie a little bit, like the whole concept, like the reason Freddy is doing all this is because he was never laid to rest. So they have to give him a proper burial, with the holy water and the cross and everything like that. I thought that was, as a kid, that captured my imagination very well, because it made me think of like Frankenstein and Dracula and all that Gothic stuff. And then in Nightmare 4, that's when they really established that his whole deal is he lives in the dream realm and his power comes from the souls of the kids he kills. He keeps them inside himself and makes them, I guess, live forever hearing bad puns,
Yeah, I think
they're all just sat at little typewriters giving him dialogue for the rest
maybe
of the time.
That's what you're in my writing room now, bitch.
He has more and more puns in each film because he's got more writers in his writing room.
Exactly. Well, and then in like Freddy versus Jason, they reference that Freddy's entire, which kind of goes back to the first movie, they reference that his entire power comes from the fear. So if everybody forgets his name, then he has nothing, no power, no ability. But if people are like, oh God, it's Freddy killing people, then people start to get scared and then they start having the nightmares, and then he gets to come to the nightmares. So it's always been kind of murky and definitely been like freeform jazz for a lot of it.
Yeah, that's why I like, New Nightmare, it's like it's the actors, right? It's not the characters in that movie. And they basically all created like an egregore, which is where everyone gets, like everyone believes in something so strongly it becomes a real thing.
Yeah. And this idea that like Freddy isn't really even Freddy, he's just a part of humanity that has existed in many, many different ways throughout history, in basically a story that scares people. And Freddy's just a new modern equivalent. And but he's become so powerful because of mass media, basically. So it's like, as to where, it used to be the big bad stories were, spread among towns, among tribes, among maybe countries. Now it's like Freddy is international. Everywhere you go, people know who he is, and it's too much power. And then when they stop making the movies, that it decides it doesn't need movies anymore, then it's just going to start killing people in real life.
Well,
I kind of like that.
In this first film, Freddy himself is not a big character. It's more just the idea of nightmares are what's scary.
Yeah, well,
it's more of a high concept horror.
Oh yeah, and the idea that parents do not listen to their children. I mean, that's a really like a massive part of it. Like they keep telling their parents like what's wrong, and their parents' response is, no, you just need to get some sleep. It's the worst possible thing you could do, is just need to get some sleep.
Well, technically she does. The thing with Nancy is she's correct, but she also is she when they're like you've gone nuts, she has gone nuts.
Oh,
I mean, it's not like it's, you know, like when you're a teenager, you're like watching Nancy. Yeah, she's strong. She's doing it. When you watch it now, you're like, she actually is nuts. And, you know, like it makes sense. She is at this point, you know, so she's just not wrong.
Yeah. Being correct doesn't mean you're not nuts.
Well, and there are also a lot of things that you notice the more you watch the movie. Like, I mean, they're not super subtle about it, but Nancy's mom is clearly an alcoholic. I mean, it's very, very clear that she is drinking herself into a stupor. But the other thing you keep in mind, Dad doesn't live there. Right. Dad never comes into the house.
And if you look, the house.
And if you look really closely, you can see that he's sleeping in his office. His couch is like made up like a little bed in the sheriff's station.
I didn't spot that.
It's subtle. It's very subtle, but it's very clear that he's just leaned into his job fully, and that's it. Which plays into the idea though that, like, you know, what happens when your parents are so busy with their own bullshit. They're so busy with their friggin' divorce. They're so busy with their friggin' drinking problem. They're so busy with their job or whatever that they're not listening to when you're saying like, this guy is going to kill me in my dreams. And they're like, okay, sweetie, just go to sleep. Yeah. And they're meant to be your caregivers. They're meant to be your protection. Also, it kind of falls into a biblical territory because, you know, the sins of the father will be delivered upon the children. I mean, that's Freddy Krueger, man. The parents torched him alive, and he was like, I'm going to get your kids, and that's how I'm going to get you back. So, and it says a lot about suburban life too. And that's something that's consistent throughout a lot of the movies too, is that the suburban board family, which I find really fascinating because I joined suburbia late in life. My mother and I, like, my mother's goal was to get us to suburbia. We were living in the ghetto. She was like, we got to get to suburbia. So when I got to suburbia, I was like, wow, there's a lot of bored white people doing a lot of stuff. like that was the first thought, you know? So, but that's something they play up a lot, especially when you watch like Nightmare on Elm Street 3, the Kristen character. She's from a upper class family, very rich, but the money can't help. You know, they end up having to send her away. The money doesn't help. The money can't protect you in your dreams. But the parents think, you know, I'm doing everything I can. No, you're not. Why don't you just listen? Take what your children say at face value one time, and you might be able to help them. No, sir. No time for that. We got country clubs. We got social events to visit. You know, there's a lot of that in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, like an immense amount. And it starts in the first one. Everybody seems too busy. They're never too busy to punish the teenagers, but they're always too busy to listen to them. Mm-hmm. And that's like a major element of the film. Like, it's like the only way you can get the attention of any parents in that movie is to do something horribly wrong or die. Then all of a sudden your parents are there crying and stuff.
Well, we never even see Rod's parents till he's dead.
Yeah. Well, I get the vibe he didn't have a good home life.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's clearly the intention. But then it's like, oh, but suddenly they are there and caring when he's dead.
Oh yeah, of course. And so I think that's something that I'm thinking about a lot more now that we're talking about it. I hadn't thought a ton about that. But yeah, the parents really don't care until it's life or death, and then only if they're right. You know?
Yeah.
Like, see, I told you hanging out with that Rod guy, he was a bad character, and look, he killed his girlfriend. It's like, he didn't kill his girlfriend. It's like, yeah, I'm pretty sure that I'm right, and that's why I'm here, you know.
But and that's a scary thought. You can kind of see the point of view of like,
oh sure,
am I going to believe that a ghost dream man killed this girl, or that this guy who was in the room with her killed her?
Oh no, I absolutely agree. But from the perspective of, because the main characters, regardless of the credit block, crediting John Saxon first, the main characters are the teenagers. And the idea, not only that like your parents can't protect you, but that maybe your parents are incompetent, but they're your caregivers. They're the people who literally made you safe your whole life. And now all of a sudden they just are ineffectual. They can't do anything for you. That's scary.
A huge part of the teenage experience is realizing, oh, adults aren't just, they don't automatically know what they're doing. They're just as stupid as I am.
No, you're totally right. Absolutely.
There's many cases where, my daughter's 12 now, and there's plenty of cases where I'm like, she probably actually knows what she's doing better than I'm going to in this case. So I'm going to follow her lead.
Yeah, exactly.
I often say I think the reason I don't respect authority is because very young, I realized my teachers were not smart. I was in a math lesson in elementary school. My teacher said, if you multiply 10 by 0, you get 0. If you multiply 0 by 10, you get 10 because there's 10 of something. I just sat there like, oh, I don't have to listen to what you say.
Did you pass the class?
Yeah, it was elementary school. It was very easy.
Man, I wish I had an inciting incident. I was just a little shit immediately. I was just like, who cares what this person's saying?
I think I was a little shit immediately, and I retroactively justified it to myself with that incident.
Now that we're talking about Nightmare on Elm Street 1, which was such a pivotal movie for me, watching as a child and watching in my teen years, that might have really played into my massive distrust of authority. Massive distrust of authority. I mean, when I was like 15 and a half, I was like counting down the days. I was like, oh man, 6 more months till I can drop out legally. Don't ever have to show up here again. Peace out, motherfuckers.
I didn't go that hardcore, but yeah, I am sitting here thinking, and then maybe these movies sculpted that for me as well. I don't know.
But I like to think in a positive way, because like me and Matt both work with kids. And I do try to remember that feeling and listen to what kids say.
Oh, sure.
And you can definitely, I can tell like, oh, you're just misbehaving because you think that's the way you'll get my attention and stuff like that. And I try to be aware of these things because so many adults when I was a kid were not aware.
Yeah.
Of that I was a human being with my own thoughts.
Well, that's not really what school's for.
No, definitely not.
But no, I mean, and I don't want it to sound negative either. Like the best decision I ever made personally was dropping out of high school. For me personally, it was the best decision I ever made. I don't believe that that's the best decision for every human being, but I'm really glad that I made that decision. I'm really glad that I developed such a deep distrust of authority when the only reason to listen to them is because I said so. It's like, well, you're worthless to me. Like that was my attitude when I was 15, and I wasn't even a kid who got in trouble. I would like sit quietly and do my work. But then if the teacher told me I had to do something that didn't make sense, I was like, no. And then I'd be in trouble.
Actually, yeah. I'm now remembering an example of me being a little shit, which I think is before the 0 thing. Where my teacher had I'd done some question and my teacher had written my homework, you have to da-da-da-da. Like, oh, you have to show you're working. And I'd written underneath, I don't have to, you want me to. She was not happy with, but I stand by that I was correct in that.
Yeah. The first time I got in like serious trouble was in middle school? It might have been middle school or was the end of elementary school. My mother got called because I was in gym class and I decided to just like not run or play the game. I was just kind of standing there. And the teacher was like, come on, you got to go. You got to try to win. And I was like, why? He was like, because you want to win. And I was like, what do I get if I win? And he's like, well, then you can say you won. And I was like, I can say that now. And oh, what a little shit. I was perfectly fine until they spoke to me,
I love when we'll do a game in class, and after class one of the kids will run up to the board and just start adding points to their thing. I'm like, the game's over. You could add as much as you want, you didn't win.
Maybe to you it is.
Yeah.
This is the real quiz.
And I think that's a big beautiful thing about this movie in particular, about the first one in particular, is that it is a middle-aged man really trying to capture that sense of disenfranchisement that you get when you're in that awkward age where you're not quite an adult. You're still treated like a child, even though you might have like nearly the body of an adult. But you don't have the experience to get by. and you're still relying on these people, but you're also realizing they're just people. So honestly, that makes it, I think I could see why it became kind of timeless and so scary.
Well, and also you would the stuff you were saying earlier about Wes Craven's background, which I hadn't really heard before. It makes a lot of sense that he probably never got to explore these feelings when he was that age. Like, if he didn't have films and media and stuff, and I'm sure none of the adults would talk to him about something like that. So he probably did have a lot of feelings to work out about that period of his life. So, and
the biggest, from what I had read, the biggest experience, the biggest thing in his family was they're really big on education. So that was the way. It was like, oh, if you want to know about the world, go to college. You know, if you want to know about the world, study really hard so you can go to a good college. And because he was a college professor before he became a filmmaker. In fact, he would, on the weekends, he would go work on any movie set, because he was down in, I think, New Jersey. He would work in any like movie set he could get on, which was almost exclusively pornos. He was constantly, which is so fascinating, knowing his background and how stuffy his background was, but he was like constantly on the set of these like grindhouse New York pornos.
Yeah, I'm sure he stuffed a few backgrounds there.
Well, probably not, because he was so notoriously like, I don't have a joke. But the first film he directed was actually a porno movie, and it didn't come out until years after. And I'm trying to remember the name of it. I'm trying to see if I can pull it up. It was called. Oh,
do I risk typing Wes Craven porno into Google?
You'll find it. It's called Angela, the Fireworks Woman.
That sounds.
But what's crazy, dude, is if you watch it, you can totally tell that this guy was one day going to make Nightmare on Elm Street. Like, there were scenes that were very similar in the like dreamy parts, and it's not a great movie by any stretch. But the other thing is, if you ever, like, when I first put it on to watch it, because I was like, did Craven really make this? The first thing you see is this character that kind of like bookends the movie, is like this mysterious fellow. It's Wes Craven. It just is him. So he's in the movie in a non-action role, but he's in the movie. So you're like, oh, okay, I guess you can't argue with that. He was there, because there he
is.
Can you give us the dramatic reading?
The sexual exploits of a girl in love with her brother, who decides to join the priesthood. So that sounds like the porno Wes Craven would make to me.
Yeah, for real.
So what orifice do these fireworks come out of?
Well, you'll have to watch to find out. I'm not one for spoilers. But so he makes that movie, and that's what leads him to making Last House on the Left, because at that time, these like drive-in horror guys and these New York City porno guys they all were working together a lot, sharing talent and camera operators and stuff like that. Because you got to remember that in this era, I mean, if you want to make a porno movie, you had to have grips and gaffers and real camera people. You had to have at least some degree of real lighting, lots of lube, but yet everything just looked filthy all the time. No soap, lots of lube. That was the 1970s. It was a 1970s methodology.
Both kinds of grips.
It's true. You have your key grip, and then you have your key grip. So, but back then, I mean, it wasn't uncommon that these guys, the crew people, would be working on a porno for a week, and then they'd go and work on some like low budget martial arts movie for a week, and then they'd be back on a porno set, because they were just didn't need to be working. And it was the same way with the directors and stuff. So that was what led him to get Last House on the Left financed. Was his work in porno helped him meet some people who financed movies. But I do recommend, if your sensibilities are, fine with it, I highly recommend watching Angela, the Fireworks Woman, just to see like the first time Craven told a story on camera, because it's really interesting. It's not a terrible
for research purposes.
Yeah. They literally don't make movies like that anymore.
No, they don't.
The plot synopsis now is they walk into a room and fuck.
Whoa. Who can afford the walking? Let's get rid of the walking, guys. They've just always been in this room, and now they're fucking.
They've always been in this room, and they always will be.
They'll be in the room in all of our hearts.
I think that's what happens in Hellraiser.
In a black timeless void, she opens her black timeless void.
Well,
we should do the effects a bit here, I suppose, because
Oh, yeah,
these are
yeah.
notable effects. Some,
Yes,
some
definitely.
wonky, but always creative.
Yeah, there was every, like, even if you can see like, okay, that's a model and da da da, it was all really outlandish and bizarre, and you're just thinking, wow, how did they come up with this in 1985, and how did they think they were going to be able to pull this off? But they did.
Well, and the one thing about Nightmare on Elm Street, like a few years ago, I went to a drive-in movie where they a drive-in theater where they showed Nightmare on Elm Street, they showed Halloween, and they showed Friday the 13th. It was an awesome triple feature. But the one thing I noticed watching it was how inexpensive Friday the 13th clearly was in comparison to the other two, and how and it was a big reminder of how expensive Nightmare on Elm Street was for being a B movie. They dropped over $1 million into it. So they did get to do some really inventive things. Of course, I think that the greatest achievement was using the room from Break-In 2. So the room where Tina's getting pulled up the wall, as she's getting pulled up the wall, they had a room that was perfectly balanced, and grips could push the sides, and it would twist. That room was developed for, I think it was either Break-In or Break-In 2, the dancing movies. It was designed so that a guy could dance up the wall and walk up onto the ceiling and dance on the ceiling. So that was literally what it was designed and built for. And then they repurposed it for Nightmare on Elm Street. And so they used that to do the Tina effect, and then they also used it to create the blood fountain. So the room was just upside down, and they just let the blood let it rip. But my favorite story about the crazy room is that the actress playing Tina, Amanda Weiss, she was they shoot take after take after take. And the way that you do that effect is the camera guy is bolted down in the corner of wherever he's filming from, because he has to stay with the room. So when the room turns, you don't notice any change. Same with the lights. The lights all have to be bolted in place so that they follow the room as it spins. And during one of the takes, she was laying on the floor, but it's the ceiling of this room. And when they yelled cut, they said, like, okay, we're going to take 15 if anybody needs, get a drink of water, or get a little something to eat. And Amanda Weiss was like, I can't get up. And they were like, well, what's wrong? And she's like, I can't get up because I'll fall. And they're like, no, you won't. And she was like, I don't know what to do. And Wes Craven, I guess, poked his head through the window and went, hey, look at me. Okay, see, I'm standing on the floor. Okay, now see where my legs are? Look, your legs are going to be right there. So just get up. And he just like helped her up out of the set. And she walked out. She was like, I just became like, I was in there so long. And he was like, oh yeah, it's disorienting. It's like super, super disorienting. And when you watch the scene where she gets pulled up the wall, if you watch Rod, the guy who's standing in the corner going like, Tina, you can see his hair is like, is gelled in place, like really hard. And you can see him kind of like, because he's being like slowly turned upside down.
Yeah, I was wondering if he was green screened in or if he was in the room, but yeah.
Yeah, at that time, now maybe not even 6 years later, matting him and green screening him would have probably been easier. But at that time, it was much easier to just have him sit on the same bolted thing that the camera guy was on. Now, I would not want to be the camera guy, though. I like, it's just like, don't worry, we're just going to slowly turn you upside down. Just keep looking through the lens. You'll just think that you're destroying physics.
Doing it.
Yeah.
I last year I sort of had my analogy to that. I was in, I went to the hospital. I just got like surgery in my mouth, right? So the hospital bed was like up at like at least a 45-degree angle, if not like a little higher, And I remember because I'd be taking a nap or I had my eyes closed, and then the doctors would come in and look through the window. When I opened my eyes, it was always like they're coming in from the ceiling.
Oh yeah.
First, what the hell's happening?
When I was a kid, I used to stare at the night sky until I got so disoriented. I didn't really I would get confused, and it used to scare me because I used to imagine, I'd be like, what if I just fell up?
Yeah. If you're in a big enough field and just looking at the sky, and then eventually it stops feeling like the earth is down and the sky starts feeling like down. And then you're like,
yeah.
A lot of the effects in this movie, I guess one of the reasons I like them, they make me more than say Halloween or Friday the 13th. They feel like the kind of things you'd see on like a seaside resort dark ride haunted house.
Okay,
Like not
okay.
Disneyland level, not Haunted Mansion level, but if anyone's been there, I'm specifically thinking Rehoboth Beach, Delaware, or Ocean City, Maryland, where they just have these dark rides that have been there for 50, God, probably 70 years at this point. Just like very creative, very weird effects, you know?
No, and they're way out there. I know that the way they designed Freddy Krueger's makeup was on a slice of cheese pizza.
That makes sense.
I mean, it does when you think about it. But yeah, that
Yeah.
they said that he just kind of sat there with a knife and the fork and just kind of moved the cheese around and was like, I think this is the way he should look.
So he literally looks cheesy. Okay.
Oh, you know.
And I think
yeah.
it was this when the standard Freddy makeup is not in this movie. That doesn't appear till the second or the third, I think.
By the third one, it started to become pretty standard. By the fourth, fifth, and sixth ones, it was basically a one-piece thing they glued on, and it looks pretty silly. It still works. He's still Freddy, but it looks a bit silly. So this one, they were still gluing like a million pieces onto his face. But with every movie, they would kind of develop it a little bit more. Actually, one interesting thing, Nightmare 3, his makeup like changes from shot to shot sometimes. So does his voice. Like there are a couple of scenes where it sounds like they just forgot to deepen his voice. Like he just is Robert Englund going, bitch.
Should have
So-
done that the whole time.
I know, right? Well, but then like the further the movies go, the less they alter his voice too, the more they just let him be Robert Englund, you know? But in 3, there's like a lot of really oddly uneven things. I know that movie was insanely rushed, considering how big it was. That they were running like 3 units at once sometimes, trying to get the day's shoot, and they went incredibly over budget, incredibly over time. And the only reason no one got in trouble was because the movie was insanely successful. So then everybody forgets very quickly.
Oh, I did my Seaside Resort tangent, didn't get to my actual point, which was I wanted to get to the mom's death scene, which is totally bizarre.
Oh yeah, where she gets pulled through the thing. I mean, I appreciate that that's a shocker. You know, like you don't see that coming. It is a little silly, but it also feeds into a nightmare logic thing that I can appreciate. There are a few like nightmare logic things I really like in the film, like the stairs that turn into goop to make it harder for her to run
Yeah.
away. That stuck with me forever. I would always think about that. You know, is it busy? Like apparently there's a big debate. Some people claim it was cream of wheat, but the effects guy says it was Bisquick with just half as much water as you're supposed to put in it.
Oh,
So-
yeah, I heard that as well. That's why I keep bringing up cream.
now it all makes sense. We're getting somewhere, folks.
No, the one for me was when she's in the bath and then suddenly it's super deep.
Oh yeah, I love that.
Because if you ever have that feeling of like falling asleep in the bath or slipping in the bath, you also, oh my God, I'm in water. Oh, it's just a bathtub. It's like a foot.
Well, and the whole, you know, again, like the parents, because her mom warns her, like, don't fall asleep, you know, in the tub, you could drown. Cares about that. Doesn't care about like, mom, someone is trying to kill me.
Yeah, but
It's like-
from the dream world is a bit of an ask. I mean,
Yeah.
Well, but she brought his hat through in the sleep study.
I mean, honestly, if we want to just apply logic, once Tina is killed, like even if Rod killed her, it wasn't going to be in that way. That's insane.
No.
Yeah.
Well, and then I remember that because she gets, you know, slit the 4 slices on her chest, and then they find him. He has like a little friggin' pocket knife that like every teenager would friggin' have. Like, this must be the murder weapon. But then that's, I mean, I think that it's very clear that they want to pin it on Rod because he's poor and he has a troubled history. So they're just like, well, of course he killed his girlfriend. Like, why wouldn't he? Let's get him in prison where he belongs. I feel like that's the attitude of the adults in the movie because they're kind of combative, you know, with the young people. I mean, remember when Rod like is telling Nancy what happened? Literally he runs for it, and Nancy's dad is about to shoot him, and she steps in front of the gun and goes, no, like her dad, Saxon, was just gonna smoke his ass. Like,
Yeah.
He's got gambling bills to pay.
So so I mean, that's it. Well, and I wanted to mention because I love the trivia behind Nightmare on Elm Street. That's one of the reasons I was thrilled when you were like, what about Nightmare on Elm Street? I was like, yep, I know a lot about it. I wanted to mention there was a news story that inspired Craven to come up with the idea of dreams killing you. And apparently it was there was this incident in Laos, in Vietnam, and like Cambodia or somewhere like that, where kids were basically saying that, like, young people, teenagers were saying, like, I'm going to die if I go to sleep. And they were like refusing to go to sleep. They were trying to keep themselves awake. And inevitably, it wasn't a ton of kids, but the kids who suffered from it, they all died in their sleep. And the story that Craven had heard was about one of the kids in, I think it was Laos, had been, telling his parents, like, I can't sleep. I'm afraid if I sleep, I'll die. And they were like, you're being ridiculous. You got to get some sleep because you have to sleep or you'll go crazy. So he started, going to sleep, but he would tell them, like, I'm having trouble sleeping. And they'd be like, well, try whatever. Well, then eventually he admitted to them, like, I just can't sleep. I know I'll die if I go to sleep. And they were like, that doesn't make any sense. So then he falls asleep on the couch. His parents pick him up and set him in the bed, and they're like, thank goodness that's over. Like, now he'll get a night's sleep. And then a few hours later, they hear screaming, and by the time they get to the room, he's dead in his bed. He had been screaming, and then he was dead in his bed. That was part of the inspiration, but the big inspiration that hit Craven hard was that when the parents were like looking through the room, trying to just figure out if there was anything going on, like if he had been taking drugs or anything like that, they found a little hidden extension cord under like a rug that went into the closet and hid a little Mr. Coffee. So this kid had been secretly not sleeping for days upon days, and his parents didn't even know. So he was like, the second they went to sleep, he was just chugging coffee all night, trying not to get to die in his sleep. And Craven said that image, he, like, the second he heard that, he was like, that's a movie. Like, that's a movie. Like the kid's like sneaking coffee at night and living this other life because his parents don't believe him. But it does sound cockamamie, the idea, oh, if I go to sleep, I'm going to die. It does sound like kind of a, an anxiety thing, which is what they say in the later Nightmare movies. They say, like, oh, this is just, anxiety brought on by, what was it in part 3? They said, like, latent sexuality. Kincaid goes, great, now it's my dick that wants to kill me. So, but I remember when I heard that story, I was like, wow. Apparently it was in like the LA Times or something. They did like a bunch of stories about these people. They might have even been like Laotian and Cambodian immigrants. It's been a while since I read about it. So, but they were definitely like from Asia, and something weird was going on. But yeah, just like that. Now when you watch, Nightmare on Elm Street, you see like Nancy has her own Mr. Coffee in her bedroom, and she's downing it and taking NoDoz, like they're chiclets. And the only thing I loved about the Nightmare on Elm Street remake, by the way, is there's a part where they're like, we can't go to sleep. And he goes, and one of them goes like, well, we should do meth. And he's like, yeah, we should do meth. And he's like, where do we get meth? And neither of them know where they could get meth. So they never get any meth. I thought that was so funny, because we used to joke, when you get a little older, when crystal meth became a thing, we used to joke, we'd be like, oh, well, you could be Freddy, just become a meth head. You never sleep, your house is always clean. It's perfect. But I just love that these like two white bread kids are like, yeah, let's get some meth. Where do you get meth? I don't know.
We're not Midwest enough, I guess. I don't know.
Well, it's supposed to take place in Ohio, so they should, they might be able to find it.
So I guess I'll phrase the question to Luke first, how this movie holds up, since it's your first time you're watching it from a...
So like I said, as a high concept horror idea, just like, what if when you had a nightmare and your mother said it would be okay, she was wrong? Still works. Like, that concept is still good. I wasn't scared watching it as a 31-year-old man watching it for the first time in 2021, but I could see how it was scary and how it was groundbreaking. I think part of my problem is because I'm so aware of the pop culture character who is Freddy. I'm watching this film, and even though he's not being that wacky in this one, I'm still thinking like, oh, here's Freddy. What's he gonna do? Who's he gonna kill? So like, I think, as my understanding is, the sequels lean into that a bit harder. So yeah, I'm already in the place of like, I'm kind of rooting for Freddy more than these kids. I don't care. But trying to step out of that and just watching the film, this one still does hold up as a very good horror movie. Like I said, I can't speak to how much the others get into camp and slasher and nonsense, but this one alone, just as if the concept is strong, it's delivered pretty well, apart from some awful dialogue here and there. And yeah, so I think for anyone in my position who hadn't seen it before, if you've got any interest in horror, definitely check it out. And it does hold up still as a great film. It's just, if you're like, oh, I want something to scare me tonight, I mean, my generation is just too desensitized. You're talking about having to go and tape this and that off the internet. When I was 12, I could watch the most hardcore porn imaginable anytime my parents left the house. Like, there is nothing I couldn't see if I wanted to see it. I think before I was 15, I'd seen multiple real deaths on video. So,
well, that's like a rite of passage thing.
Yeah.
To watch that stuff. I think, with Nightmare on Elm Street, I mean, you make a good point. I think that, if you were a little younger, even having like knowledge of the pop culture version of Freddy, I think it might have gotten you a little bit more. Because I didn't see Nightmare on Elm Street 1 first. I saw probably part 3 first. I don't remember for sure, but I know I didn't see first one first. So it was a lot like I saw Terminator 2 first. And I remember seeing Terminator 1 as like a 7 or 8 year old and going, because that's a friggin' horror movie. I mean, Terminator 1 is a horror movie. And I feel like and I had the almost exact same experience with Nightmare on Elm Street. I was like, oh man, this is kind of scary and kind of fun. And then I watched the first one. And I'm like, fuck. So I still find it to be scary. But I honestly, like, as we've talked about, I haven't sat down and just thought about Nightmare on Elm Street. Just that's the only thing I'm thinking about right now in a while. And I'm like, wow. And especially since I read that Wes Craven book, which I highly recommend you check out. The title's escaping, but if you literally search Wes Craven book, it's like the one book written entirely about Wes Craven. Can't recommend it enough. There's an Audible book of it. I listened to it while I was on road trips a few years back. It gives a really interesting look into his career. And Wes Craven did something that really no other filmmaker did, which is he reinvented the genre of horror twice. George Romero reinvented the genre once, and he's a legend. John Carpenter reinvented the genre once. He's a legend. But then you get Wes Craven. He reinvents the genre with Nightmare on Elm Street, and then he reinvents the genre with Scream. He did it twice in a lifetime. Unheard of, incredibly well earned. And a lot of that comes from his oddly scholarly attitude towards why things should be scary or why they should bother you or what society says about things. And it's funny, being the least scholarly human being on earth is probably me, and I can appreciate his calm and tested attitude towards, like, why does this scare us? Why does this make us uncomfortable? Why does this freak us out? So I still think that the movie's scary. But the thing that's always blown my mind is when I show it to people who've never seen it before, they think it's scary. I had a girlfriend scream watching Nightmare on Elm Street, like scream out loud. Like, like at the top of her fucking lungs.
Can you remember what bit it was that got her?
It was during Tina's death. It was when she started floating for a second. Like after she'd been slashing, she started floating like that. She just went, ah, like at the top of her lungs. And I was like, I thought she was screaming to scare me, like as a joke. But no, she was just like, it freaked her out. She said that afterward, I was like, why did that get you so bad? She said that she'd had a nightmare like super like that once. And as the scene was unfolding, it was reminding her of the nightmare, but she was like, well, it's not going to be my nightmare. It's going to be, and then it just was exactly like her old nightmare and that she had when she was a child. So she just let out like blood curdling scream.
I got that a few weeks ago, actually. My daughter finally was like, I want to watch some horror movies. So we had Sunday family viewings of The Shining and Alien. And oh god, what is the what's his name in The Shining? Who gets takes in the back?
I know who you mean. I want to say groundskeeper Willie.
He's got the best name. No, he's got the best name ever, and I can't remember it.
Scatman Carruthers is his real name.
Thank you. There we go. Scatman's good enough. Okay. Anyway, when the moment when Jack Nicholson gets him in the back, my wife she was like doing the dishes and just let out the best scream. And at the exact same moment, my daughter just started giggling. She thought it was funny as hell. So
Oh man.
pretty fun. Yeah. So yeah, for Henrik and me, it's just like I think both of us, this movie's just too far in our DNA to even like properly like judge it anymore.
It's true.
I mean, I've said to Luke a lot, I'm really not a horror fan. I mean, when it's a sci-fi sanctuary, I'm a sci-fi guy, but I do hold a special spot for the Elm Street movies because I mean, well, I guess it's more surreal than science fiction, but it's kind of the same flavor.
Yeah, well,
They're chock full of fantasy.
like you compare it to slashers, but this isn't just like you were saying earlier, guy with knife stalks teens.
Right.
Like this is more of a creepy, supernatural ghost story kind of horror, which is much more my jam.
Right.
Like something like a Halloween or a Jason, yeah, it's tense and it can make you jump, but it doesn't scare me in the way that like something more supernatural can.
Yeah, I mean, I think that especially these days, existential dread is a better scare than a jump scare, right?
Yeah.
Oh, the jump scare in this one's fantastic, because there's like a full 10 seconds where you know the jump scare is coming, and then it just shows going. I don't think they altered his voice for that. Rah!
Yeah.
That would sound like when they did not alter it. Oh, that's great. Like they probably should have. There's one in the first one they probably missed.
Yeah, it could be.
So Henrik, I guess we're pulling in the ship. So what's going on with you in movie land and so forth? And,
well,
you got your podcast.
Yeah, well, movie land is slowly but surely reopening. I shot a Western earlier this year that is just about ready to be handed over to the distributor, and we're getting ready to shoot our annual Halloween short, which we had to skip last year. So this year we'll be doing a Halloween short and hopefully shooting some more scary features in the very near future. It's just kind of touch and go. We just kind of wait and see kind of deal right now. But and in the podcast land, we just celebrated our 100th episode of Weekly Spooky, my weekly scary story podcast. And now we're getting ready for October season, which is our busy season when lots of new listeners kind of come in because they want scary stuff. And for the entire month of October on Weekly Spooky, every episode is about or revolving around Halloween. So it like extra fall flavor, you can smell the pumpkin spice and taste the candy corn. So if anybody wants to check that out, anywhere you listen to podcasts, you can go to you just search Weekly Spooky or go to weeklyspooky.com.
Do you have a good Halloween trivia question for us?
Luke
literally needs a few, right?
Yeah.
I need a Halloween trivia. Oh man.
He's making a Halloween quiz.
Okay, here's a good one. It's a literal Halloween trivia because it's trivia about the Halloween franchise. What is the mark on Michael Myers' hand called? There's a mark on his hand revealed in the later series. And what is it called?
Oh, I'm not deep enough into the Halloween franchise for that. Do you want to take a stab?
The mark of the ogre.
Well, you're not far off because they're actually a druid rune. It's a druid rune of the thorn.
I was just thinking because Mike Myers was Shrek.
But hey, it's synchronicities, man. They work out in the end.
There you go.
Luke, our jam.
Yeah, if you've enjoyed this podcast, you can find it on Twitter at MLSFS109. We're also on Facebook, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify. Just search Matt and Luke Sci-Fi Sanctuary. But you're already listening to it, so just continue listening to it. Make sure you give us a 5-star rating and review. Tell all your friends, blah, blah, blah. And if you want to help us keep it online, because, you have to pay to host it. Matt's to pay for Zoom and stuff like that. You go to patreon.com/podcastio.
And I'll leave out going out with the one line that I was not in this movie. I kept waiting for it, and I just never got the "How sweet fresh meat."
Is that a sequel thing? Or?
It's a sequel thing.
Yeah, it's a sequel.
I guess we'll hit the record then.
All right. I'm going to bed. Are you sure you want to stop recording?
But that one is in the cloud. I'll get the